Welcome, guys, to this new series we're doing this off season. As we're going to highlight the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets as a team on the rise to keep your eyes out for in 2025, guys. Key has made this roster a formidable upset foe over 2023 and 2024. First to come to mind, the back-to-back upset wins over Miami, the quadruple overtime game with Georgia, the big win over Florida State in week 0 in a primetime moment. Guys, it really does feel like Georgia Tech is on the climb to becoming a legitimate threat in the ACC for 2025. We're talking about returning quarterback play, a lot of returning production on a team that's consistently finishing right around a mid 500 record, but playing everyone close and having memorable, marquee, massive upsets. Chase, Freddie, I want to know what one of you guys is thinking about whether or not the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets are a team to watch for the 2025 season.
Yeah, I actually want to go first with this one. I am on the same trajectory. I think they are absolutely primed to be, if they can keep guys, that's the biggest thing in college football nowadays. Can these decent Power Five teams keep the really high end guys that they have on their roster? Jamal Haynes was one of them. That was a big one for me. Was he going to stick around? It seems like he is. And then bringing in big time guys that didn't maybe work out at other universities. Haynes King is another big one that I'm thinking of there. Didn't work out at Texas A&M stop. However, at Georgia Tech, absolutely used him in every possible way that they could. Um, and I think when you're looking at next year's schedule, you have 5 away games. Um, and you get some of your biggest games at home this season. Clemson, you get Pitt, who is ranked inside the top 20 at one point this season, and then you get your big time rival Georgia at home at the end of the year, who you again Quinn just mentioned you took to triple overtime last year, or not triple overtime, my bad, 8 overtimes it was, right?
Yeah, 8.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
My bad, not triple, 8. Sorry. So not only are they on the upward trajectory, I think Georgia Tech with under Brent Key's tutelage, the biggest thing with Georgia Tech over the past couple decades is that they were stuck with a long-time ball coach that wanted to run the triple option. And hey, it really gives some teams fits. But if a team can figure it out for that one game and one game you only have to play them, then it's okay. And Georgia Tech moving to the modern offense. It took a couple years and it looked pretty bad for Brent Key early on. You had Jeff Sims, shout out Jeff Sims, backup Nebraska quarterback now. Brother cannot, or Arizona State actually, my bad. I think brother cannot throw a ball to save his life. Should have been playing defensive back out there. It was horrible. It was the opposite of Nick Marshall. So you had him at starting quarterback in one year, and I think Brent Key still won 5, 6 games that year with a kid that couldn't throw. So the fact that he was doing that, I think he's really placed great weapons in spots to help his team. Because honestly, in football, you don't need elite talent everywhere all across the field. You just need it in a couple certain spots. If you have if you have good trenches, which I believe Georgia Tech really does, they have a great run game. They have a really good push in the run game. And then you have one or two guys that can really perform well. And last year for Georgia Tech, it was Eric Singleton, who is now going to Auburn, but also Jamal Haynes. You can have a guy like Haynes King back there that still performs extremely well for them. So for me, I think Georgia Tech next year, you could be seeing a double-digit team winning next year. Not this year, but the year before when they beat Miami and they made some really good moves. And then this year they had a pretty good season as well. I think they're just slowly climbing that ladder of Georgia Tech is a really good team and a team I really don't want to face. I'm an SEC fan, I'm an Alabama fan, and most of the times I'm watching these Georgia Tech games like, golly, please don't let me play Georgia Tech. That is a scrappy, gritty, tough team that is going to fight tooth and nail no matter if they're down 20 or 2. So it's a really good team that I think Brent Key's done a lot with so far. Fred?
Yeah, that's the one thing that I wanted to touch on with Georgia Tech is the physicality under Brent Key. Like you went from a team that was the triple option that tried to punch in the face, but also it's a little bit of a finesse, right? It's you can't find the ball. Where's the ball going? A lot of eye candy. Whereas it seems as though Georgia Tech has morphed into a team where they want to be able to compete with Georgia physically. And that's something that we saw last year in the 8 overtime game was that they were able to do that. They were able to punch Georgia in the face early. It knocked them off their heels to the point where their back was against the wall, and that's something that we did not see, or that we don't see much of with Georgia. Even when they lose, it's normally like a tight ball game that they lose, that they end up losing. But they were knocked off early and often, and that's what impressed me with Georgia Tech. Miami the same way. They out muscled Miami, and I know that that's not saying much because Miami is not a team that's known for their physicality. But when you're in the ACC, Miami is a team that you have to outmuscle in order to be competitive in the conference. And thank God that they are in the ACC, because I'm looking at teams like Wake Forest, Virginia, Duke, Syracuse, Boston. Like, these are all teams that they play next year that I think they already have a leg up on because of what happened last year. Now, Virginia Tech was a team last year that people were very, very high on. And I'm not really sure why it didn't pan out that way. Maybe it will in 2025. But they impressed me. I mean, we watched them play in the Birmingham Bowl against Vandy, and Vandy was one of those teams that's very similar to Georgia Tech in a sense of that's what they tried to be. Vandy was in the SEC, was they tried to be physical. Like, they tried to punch you in the face early. They tried to play tight-nosed football and don't make many mistakes, and that's what Georgia Tech does, and that's how you're able to see Vandy upset Alabama. You're able to see Vandy take Texas to the wire and lose by, I think, 2 points. Like, you saw these things by this Vanderbilt team, and I see these things in Georgia Tech. So super excited for them. They are poised next year to have a very good year. I'm just very conscious of a letdown season after you did have such a good season the year before. But I think Brent Key does have them in the right direction.
And let me actually add this. I think Georgia Tech is quickly approaching the Big 12 Kansas State category for myself, at least, where they're always going to be hanging around the top 2 to 4. And if one of those top teams have a bad year, you could easily see Georgia Tech in the conference championship game. That's kind of where I'm sitting. Like, next year, I could see Georgia Tech a top 5 ACC team. And if they're high end good, they could be sitting at that 2 or 3 spot. And Clemson has a bad year. Florida State has a bad year. We're talking about, wow, Georgia Tech's in the ACC championship. How did that happen? And it's because they are just always hanging around. I just think they're quickly approaching that for me, like how we've talked about Kansas State and those teams in the past. So that's where I'm feeling about Georgia Tech.
Yeah, I want to say this, and you hit exactly what I was wanting to hit on with Georgia Tech. I think they're trying to take NC State's spot as that like top scrappy team of the ACC. No disrespect to Louisville and Jeff Brom. I think they could also take that role. I think they're right there in the same contender spot. It's just I look at this schedule, for 2025, your road trips aren't that scary. Colorado is going to be in a rebuild mode. Wake Forest is not a scary opponent. Duke does not scare me. North Carolina State does not scare me for 2025. Boston College, I think, is your scariest road game of the entire season.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really helpful setup. So we'll see. Like I said, I expect good things from Georgia Tech this year, but I think, Freddie, you bring up some good points. With a school like Georgia Tech, you always got to be a little weary of, oh no, is the other shoe going to drop, or is this actually positive change? So we will have to wait and see for how the cards deal themselves out in 2025. But until then, we're going to let you go. We've been Three Bold Takes. I am Quinn. I've been joined by Freddie and Chase, and we will see you in the next video.